We continue now at the top of Daf Pei Bezam and Bezam Meseches Menachos. This is Menachos Daf 82b. This Daf is sponsored by Alexander Rosenfeld in memory of Gershon Ben Yaakov. Thank you for your sponsorship. If you would like to sponsor an Amud or a Daf, see the description box below and see the description box below to see how you can support this channel. On the previous Amud, the Mishnah mentioned that the Korban Pesach can only be brought from funds of Chulin and not from Ma'aser Sheni. And the Gemara asked, what is the source for that? And the Gemara brought a Braisa, and in the Braisa, Rabbi Eliezer says that it says Pesach by Mitzrayim, and it also says Pesach L'Doros, Pesach for all generations. Now, just like the Pesach in Mitzrayim obviously was brought from Chulin, there was no Ma'aser Sheni in Mitzrayim. That's not only until they arrived at Eretz Yisrael. And so therefore, for Pesach L'Doros also, for Pesach for all generations, the same is going to be true. It can only be brought from Chulin. Now, in the Braisa, Rabbi Akiva argued, how can you learn from Pesach Mitzrayim? V'chidonin efshar mishi efshar. It's impossible in Mitzrayim. That's a situation where there is no Ma'aser Sheni, so you can't learn something possible from something that's impossible. Rabbi Eliezer said, even though it is efshar, even though it's impossible, it still is a raya gedola, a great proof. And then Rabbi Akiva said a different argument why you cannot learn from Korban Pesach that was in Mitzrayim, because the Korban Pesach in Mitzrayim ein ton matan domim ve'imurin legavi mizbeach. There was no requirement of application of the blood to the mizbeach. There was no requirement of burning the sacrificial portions on the mizbeach, and therefore, again, you can't learn from Pesach Mitzrayim. And the Gemara now continues with Rabbi Akiva's argument, Tomar bePesach Doros, whereas you'll say by Pesach for all generations, Shaton matan domim ve'imurin legavi mizbeach. There is a requirement of the application of the blood and the sacrificial portions being burned on the mizbeach, and so therefore again, Rabbi Akiva again argues you cannot bring a proof from Pesach Mitzrayim to Pesach Doros. And the Gemara continues, the Braisa rather continues, Amar lo, Rabbi Eliezer said back to him, he said back to Rabbi Akiva, Harehu Omer, but it says in the Pasuk, V'avadeto eso avoda hazos b'chodesh hazeh, it says you're going to do this avoda in this month, and we learn from the Pasuk, Sheyu kol avodos shel chodesh hazeh kozeh, that all of the avodos that are done in this month, they should be done kozeh, they should be done like this. Essentially, the Pasuk is saying that whatever was done in Mitzrayim, whatever was done with the Korban Pesach in Mitzrayim, just like there, it had to be brought from Chulin, so too the Pesach that's going to be Ladoros, it's the same. It has to be brought only from Chulin. And the Gemara now continues and analyzes the Brais of Rabbi Akiva. According to Rabbi Akiva, who does not learn from Pesach Mitzrayim, Isavar lo de'ein donin efshar mishi efshar, if he holds that we do not learn something possible from something impossible, so Leiko b'milse, so he should just stick with that original argument. You can't learn from Pesach Mitzrayim because that's a situation of impossible. And he hadarbe, if he changed his mind on that, he doesn't hold ein don and efshar mishi efshar. V'haidelo gomer mi Pesach Mitzrayim mishum haipirch. And the reason why he's not learning from Pesach Mitzrayim is because of the second argument he made, that again Pesach Mitzrayim does not require matan domim and emurin legavi mizbeach. So if that's true that it's mishum haipirchu, that it's because of that refutation, so then Pesach Midbar Yochiach, what about the Pesach in the Midbar? That should prove the other way. The Pesach in the Midbar there also, it was certainly brought from Chulin. They didn't arrive in Eretz Yisrael yet. There was no Ma'aser Sheni, but by the Pesach of the Midbar, there was an application. There was application of blood, and there was sacrificial portions on the Mizbeach, and so therefore his argument is not a good argument. And the Gemara continues, L'devorah of the Rabbi Eliezer ka'amar. Really, Rabbi Akiva was just talking according to the position of Rabbi Eliezer, not necessarily according to his own point of view. Lididi, he was saying as follows, according to me, ein donin efshar mishi efshar. We can't learn something possible from something that is impossible. But lididach, but according to you, the amrit donin efshar mishi efshar, that you say we can learn something possible from something impossible. So ma lePesach Mitzrayim, but still, Pesach Mitzrayim is unique. Shekain einoton matan domim ve'imurin legavi mizbeach, because there's no requirement of the application of the bloods and of the burning of the sacrificial portions on the mizbeach. Tomar bePesach Doros, whereas by Pesach Doros, the Pesach for all generations, shaton matan domim ve'imurin legavi mizbeach. There is a requirement of matan domim and emurin legavi mizbeach. V'yomar lei Rabbi Eliezer, and so Rabbi Eliezer says to him, v'yavadata, that again we have the source of the pasuk v'yavadata, and that says however it was done here, that's how it's done for all generations, and that's why Rabbi Eliezer argues again we can learn from Pesach Mitzrayim that it should not be brought from the funds of Ma'aser Sheni. The Gemara continues, Rabbi Eliezer, according to Rabbi Eliezer, lei molei, why doesn't he say to Rabbi Akiva, Pesach Midbar Yochiach, that the Pesach of the Midbar proves you wrong? Again, Rabbi Akiva's refutation of Rabbi Eliezer is that the Pesach in Mitzrayim there was no matan damim and emurim on the mizbeach, but by Pesach Midbar there was. And the Gemara continues and answers, Lidvor of Rabbi Akiva ka'amar le. Rabbi Eliezer was just responding according to the view of Rabbi Akiva. Lididi, according to me, don in efshar mishi efshar, we can learn what's possible from what's impossible. Therefore, we can learn from Pesach Mitzrayim. Umishum haypirchen, in terms of the refutation that you have about the emurim and about the blood, the application of the bloods, Pesach Midbar yochiach. Again, the Pesach Midbar proves that wrong. But lididach, according to you, da'amrit ein don in efshar mishi efshar, you say we cannot learn what is possible from what is impossible. So v'yavadita, so then we have the pasuk of v'yavadita. But the Gemara continues and asks, "V'hashta nami lifruch." But even if we're learning from V'yavadita, which essentially compares the Pesach in Mitzrayim to Pesach Doros, that's a hekish. But we should still ask the same question of Ein Don in Efshar, Mishi Efshar. You can't learn something possible from something impossible. And the Gemara says to that, Amar Rav Sheshes says, "Zo Meris." This proves Ein Mishivan ala hekish, that we don't respond to a hekish with logical arguments. If you have a hekish, that's a tradition that there's a comparison, and therefore we don't refute the hekish. And the Gemara continues, Bitza Amr, in the study hall, they said, can something that is learned from a hekish, can it teach through a hekish? Because in the Mishnah, not only do we learn from a hekish the Karban Pesach that it can't be brought from Meiser Sheni, that it has to be brought from Chulin, but then we compare that to any Karban which is an obligation, and we say that also has to come from Chulin. So that essentially is a double hekish. Are we able to take something that is learned from a hekish and then use it, make another hekish to teach something else? And the Gemara answers to that, Bechlala Itmar. The reason why that's not a problem is because essentially this is something which is all in one category. It's all a general category. Pesach Kulei Chodam Milsi, meaning all of Karban Pesach is considered one. And so therefore learning Pesach Doros from Pesach Mitzrayim, that's not like two separate categories. That's all essentially saying that all Karban Pesach is the same, and therefore that's not even really considered to be Hekesh number one. That's all considered one unified halacha, and there really is just one Hekesh over here. And the Gemara continues and asks for Rabbi Akiva. Now, according to Rabbi Akiva, Pesach de'eno ba ele min achulin min nole. If Rabbi Akiva rejects the arguments of Rabbi Eliezer, so where does he learn that Karban Pesach can only come from Chulin? And the Gemara answers to that, Nafka le mehada mar Shmuel mishum Rabbi Eliezer. He learns it from what Shmuel said in the name of Rabbi Eliezer. The pasuk says, Zos haTorah la'ola v'lamincha v'lachatos v'la'asham v'lamiluim v'lezevach hashlamim. It mentions all of these karbanos, and we learn as follows. Ola, it says Ola. Ma Ola tu'una kli, just like an Ola, it requires a vessel in terms of its service. So Af Kol To and Kli, so too all of them require a vessel. And the Gemara asks, Mahi, what utensil are we referring to over here? Ilema Mizrak, if you say we're referring to the bowl is used for the Kabbalas Hadam, for the receiving of the blood. So Gabe Zivche Shalmei Tzibor Namiksib, but by the sacrifices of Shalmei Tzibor, of the communal Shlamim also, it's also written that it says they placed it in the bowls. It says in the pasuk Vayosem Ba'aganos, they placed it in the bowls, and so therefore, essentially, by the communal shlamim, it says the same thing. Why would it be necessary to mention Ola for that? And so the Gemara continues and answers Elasak, and rather we are referring to the knife. We're saying just like by the Karban Ola, the knife is used for slaughtering, so too by all of the Karbanos. And the Gemara continues and asks, V'ola gufa minola. Now, where do we know this by the Karban Ola? And the Gemara continues and answers, Dechsiv, because it's written in the pasuk, Vayishlach Avram es yado vayikach es hamacheles lishchot es beno. It says that Avram, he stretched out his hand and he took the knife to slaughter his son. V'hasam olahu, and over there it was considered to be a Karban Ola. Dechsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, it says, Vayaleu liola tachas beno, that he offered it as an Ola instead of his son. And so therefore, again, we see that by Karban Ola, the knife is used. And the Gemara continues, the pasuk said, Mincha, what is that coming to teach us? Ma mincha eino necheles ela lezichrei kahuna, just like the Karban Mincha is only eaten by male Kohanim, af kol ein necholin ela lezichrei kahuna, so too, with regards to all of the offerings, they're only eaten by the male Kohanim. And the Gemara continues and asks on that, so what other offerings are being compared to the Mincha over here, that it's only eaten by Zichrei Kahuna? Ichatos v'asham. Now, if you're going to say we're talking about Karban Chatos and Karban Asham, that's not necessary. There already is a source, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Pei Gimel Amud Aleph.